Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back to our channel, Pakistan Zindabad, the next world superpower.
Welcome.
Today, for what is our 40th episode, we are embarking on a really intensive deep dive. We're going right back to the constitutional genesis of a nation to ask a very profound question.
And a challenging one.
Absolutely. What was the true, complete blueprint for the state's success?
And for this mission, we're really doing a synthesis, pulling together constitutional philosophy with some very rigorous historical analysis.
Our entire exploration today, and we want to be very clear about this, is based exclusively on one foundational work. That is Quaid-e-Azam of Pakistan, written by Mr. Zahir Ahmad Mir.
It's a really singular focus for us today.
It is. Okay, so let's unpack this. We've looked at foundational documents before, historical narratives, but the thesis of this particular book, it just grabs you. It demands your attention from page one because it completely reframes the entire context of national ambition.
It really does.
The core, powerful declaration, which really defines the Quaid's expectations, is this quote: "Pakistan was not created to survive. It was created to lead."
And that statement right there, it just redefines the nation's entire birthright. Think about it. If survival is your main goal, you're all ready. You're accepting a defensive posture.
You're always playing catch-up.
Always playing catch-up. You're in a permanent state of dependency. But if leadership is the goal, then you are setting the absolute highest possible internal standards.
For what? Excellence.
Excellence, sovereignty, accountability, integrity, it completely changes the game. It implies a mission that looks outward, not just inward.
That is a staggering premise, created to lead, not just to survive. But let's be practical.
Yeah.
How does the book justify that level of ambition when the nation was facing so many immediate post-colonial challenges?
The book argues that the ambition was the operating principle. It was the whole point. And our mission today is really to synthesize every principle, every reform, every warning discussed in this material to reveal the full magnitude of this intended blueprint.
We're really looking for those aha moments, aren't we? The things hidden in the blueprint that explain not just what Pakistan should have been,
but what it must still become if it's going to fulfill that original mandate, that mandate to lead.
I want to start where the source material does, which I find fascinating. It frames the vision by negation. It tells you what the Quaid did not envision for the nation he founded.
And that's so critical because it clears away all the common sort of narrative shortcuts. The book argues so forcefully that the founder never, ever imagined the country just settling.
Settling here for what?
For several limiting states of being that, well, later became the norm. First and foremost, he rejected the vision of Pakistan as just a weak, developing state.
You know that term developing? It so often becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, a trap of limitation.
It does. It implies you're always catching up, that you lack a finished identity. The Quaid, by contrast, was demanding a fully formed, completely sovereign state from day one.
Okay, so not a weak state. What else?
Flowing from that, he certainly did not intend for it to be a dependent economy. Never.
One that's always reliant on external aid.
Exactly. Or controlled by foreign debt, or worse, subject to foreign powers who dictate your internal policy through financial leverage. The goal was always economic self-determination.
Which is the only way to have true political sovereignty.
It's the prerequisite, and crucially, he did not envision a divided society. The entire project was built on the idea of constitutional unity, of equality. It rejected the idea that the state's job was to just manage constant conflict.
Whether that's political, ethnic, sectarian.
Any of it. The goal was cohesion under a single supreme law.
And maybe this is the most relevant point for any contemporary analysis. He did not intend a personality-driven polity.
Absolutely not. The state was never meant to revolve around one person or one family or one faction's charisma.
It was meant to revolve around the law.
The law. And the enduring principles of its constitution. The structures, the institutions, they must always outlive the temporary tenets of power.
So if we strip all of that away, dependency, division, personality cults, inherent weakness, what's left is this profound positive vision. And the book, it crystallizes this vision into 5 pillars. 5 non-negotiable pillars of intention.
And these 5 pillars are the constitutional architecture. This is the blueprint. First, Pakistan must be unequivocally a constitutional state.
Meaning the law is supreme.
This supreme law, not the arbitrary will of any single person, any institution. It governs every single action from the highest general or politician right down to the individual citizen. This is the foundation of all order.
That's one.
Second, and you cannot separate this from the first, is the need for a moral society.
Now, moral can be a loaded term. How does the book define it? Is it about religious ritual?
Not primarily. It defines it as a functional civic morality. It's built on these universal principles of justice, integrity, ethics, and mutual responsibility. It's about how you function as a society.
I see. And the third pillar?
It must be a disciplined nation. And like you said earlier, this isn't just about military parades. It's much deeper.
It's fiscal discipline in government.
Yes. It's civic discipline among the people, honoring contracts, paying your taxes. It's institutional discipline, where institutions follow their mandates and don't overstep, and self-discipline among leaders.
Fourth, it was always intended to be a global contributor. The vision extended far beyond just regional rivalries.
Far beyond. The Quaid's geopolitical imagination was that Pakistan was meant to have a meaningful, a positive, and a very active role on the entire world stage.
And the fifth and final pillar?
This one might be the most radical departure from traditional statecraft. It was to be a leader of principles, not power alone.
Meaning its strength wouldn't just come from its army or its economy.
Exactly. It would derive its strength from the unassailable integrity of its stance on global issues, from its moral authority.
What's so fascinating here is the link the source material draws between the internal and the external. There's a key quote that connects it all.
Yes, this one is critical. Pakistan's destiny was always global, but its foundation had to be moral and constitutional.
That quote, it establishes an absolute precondition, doesn't it? It says you can't just leapfrog the hard stuff at home.
No, you can't skip the moral and constitutional basics and jump straight to global destiny. You are only as credible abroad as you are disciplined at home.
That is a powerful challenge to so many governments, really, worldwide, that try to project strength on the outside while their own internal house is just in complete disarray.
It's a universal principle. For a destiny to be truly global, to be credible, and by that I mean the ability to influence, to mediate, to lead diplomatic efforts, it has to stem from internal stability and integrity.
It just makes sense.
Think about it. If your state is seen as constantly circumventing its own fundamental law, if its institutions are riddled with corruption, if its leadership lacks moral integrity, how can it possibly command the respect or the trust you need for a global leadership role?
It can't.
It can't. The moral and constitutional foundations, they aren't optional extras. They are the prerequisites for any real global influence. They are what transform internal discipline into external trust.
So if that's the grand vision, the book then gets into the mechanics. It lays out these three pillars as the core operating system of the Quaid's statecraft blueprint.
And it insists they're inseparable. They have to exist at the same time, constantly reinforcing each other. If one pillar fails, the whole structure it collapses.
The house cards.
Exactly. And this is where we have to dive into the mechanism of power. We're talking about three dynamic forces, not just static requirements on a checklist.
Okay, let's start with the first one, which the book provocatively calls the first superpower. Moral power.
Yes.
When you and I hear superpower, we immediately think of, what, nuclear submarines, GDP figures. Moral power is intangible. So what are the specific core ingredients the book says are required?
The book gets very concrete here. It details these ethical requirements that have to permeate the entire state and society. It starts with the simplest one, but maybe the hardest to maintain. Absolute honesty and integrity in all dealings. From national financial policy right down to daily bureaucratic interactions, the idea is that the state itself must be a moral actor.
Then you have justice, which has to be absolute, it has to be swift, and it has to be blind to a person's status, their wealth, their political connections.
Yes. And then responsibility, a complete accountability for your actions and for outcomes, especially for people holding public office.
And all of that requires ethical leadership.
It's the capstone. And this isn't just about the absence of personal corruption, not taking bribes. It means actively setting a moral standard, a standard that filters down through the entire system into the bureaucracy, into civil society.
Because if the leadership is morally compromised,
if they use their position for private gain, the entire moral architecture of the state collapses. And with it, the first superpower is gone.
I am really struck by that assertion, that moral authority is the first superpower. Let's unpack the strategic implication of that. Why is morality placed above tangible forces like the military or the economy?
Because those tangible forces can be temporary, or they can be used coercively, which just erodes your legitimacy over time. Moral authority, on the other hand, it provides legitimacy, but more importantly, it provides resilience and trust. The book actually argues that integrity saves the state money.
How so? Is the idea that internal integrity reduces the need for elaborate security forces or policing corruption.
Exactly that. The source material argues that trust is the absolute cheapest form of national cohesion and control. If contracts are honored, if taxes are paid honestly because people believe in the system, if courts are trusted, you spend so much less on enforcement, on arbitration, on internal security.
And the book has a really critical warning here.
It does. It says, a nation without morality may survive temporarily, but it never earns respect.
And that distinction between survival and respect, that's everything. A morally compromised nation might manage to survive, right? It might even thrive for a generation by exploiting its resources or its people, but that power is brittle.
It's hollow. It lacks genuine allies built on trust, and internally it invites this profound cynicism and resentment from its own people.
The long-term cost of that short-term moral compromise is catastrophic.
It is. It's the erosion of national credibility both at home and abroad. Once citizens lose faith in the integrity of their courts or their police or their tax systems, the psychological and social foundation of the state is just. It's profoundly weakened, and it doesn't matter how large its military is at that point.
So moral power ensures that the state's actions are seen not just as legal, but as legitimate, right.
Yes, it turns transactions into relationships, both inside the country and internationally.
Okay, so if Pillar 1 is the moral ethos, the spirit of the state, how do we institutionalize it? How do we apply it universally so it's not just dependent on one good leader?
And that brings us, logically and structurally, to the second pillar, constitutional power.
The supreme law.
The supreme law. The source material is completely definitive on this. The Constitution must be supreme, respected, enforced, and protected without any compromise.
The Quaid's famous declaration is the structural command here, isn't it? No state can rise above its constitution.
And that's not just rhetoric. The book frames it as a statement of structural physics. If any state institution, and it doesn't matter if it's the executive, the military, or even the judiciary itself, if it tries to operate above the law, the entire framework is fundamentally undermined.
And that leads to systemic instability.
Every single time.
Well, let me push back a bit. Let's be pragmatic. If the state is facing a genuine existential security threat, doesn't the book acknowledge that sometimes the letter of the law has to bend a little? Or is this blueprint just completely rigid?
The blueprint is rigid in its supremacy, even under pressure. The book argues that the moment you allow the law to be treated as some kind of temporary constraint that you can just set aside during a crisis, you have permanently opened the door to future deviations.
So true constitutional power is actually the resilience to uphold the law precisely during a crisis.
That's it. If the Constitution is designed to govern, it has to be the mechanism for managing existential threats, not the first casualty of them.
So constitutional power is so much more than just having a document written down somewhere. It's the dynamic, lived application of the rule of law.
Absolutely. The book meticulously breaks down the components you need to uphold this power. First, the very mechanics of the rule of law itself. It has to be predictable, consistent, and equally applied to everyone.
Which is tied directly to equality before the law.
You can't have one without the other. If justice is selective, the rule of law is just an illusion.
And then there's the ultimate guarantor, the independent judiciary.
This is the firewall. If the judiciary is beholden to political or institutional pressures, constitutional supremacy becomes an empty promise, because there's no one left who's authorized or empowered to protect the law from those who want to circumvent it.
And finally, this pillar requires what? Accountable governance, strong institutions.
Both. Accountable governance and strong institutions. And strong institutions means professional, merit-based state bodies, a civil service, a police force, a revenue authority, that all operate neutrally no matter which political party is in power.
So constitutionalism has to be this dynamic, living force where every action of the state is checked against the supreme law.
Yes. And when that happens, the Constitution becomes the true sovereign, and all national strength flows from that bedrock of legal certainty.
Okay, so once you have Pillar 1, moral power, and Pillar 2, constitutional power, solidified, the state then has the internal integrity it needs to execute its external mission.
Which is Pillar 3, global power with purpose.
So how does the Quaid's vision redefine Pakistan's global role? It's clearly not about just picking a side in a Cold War.
No, it's far more ambitious because it's principled. It's not about becoming a vassal state or blindly joining some military bloc. It's about leveraging its unique position to take a principled stand.
And that means using its influence to
To stand for justice and promote peace internationally. to act as a kind of global moral compass.
The vision also requires the nation to actively defend oppressed nations. That's a foreign policy driven by ethics, not just pure self-interest.
Exactly. And critically, to balance power with principle. This means that any strength you have, military or economic, should only be used in service of defined ethical constitutional goals.
The source material calls this idea being a conscience-driven power. Now, I have to ask you, isn't that just soft language for weakness? Especially in the eyes of traditional great powers who operate under, cold, hard, real politics.
That's a fair challenge. And if you look at history, you can see that powers that prioritize conscience often get pushed around by powers that prioritize coercion. But the book seems to argue the exact opposite, that it's actually a form of strategic strength.
How so?
Well, the book argues that conscience provides a kind of credibility that money just can't buy. A conscience-driven power uses its resources, even if they're limited, to maximize global good, to uphold international norms. And by doing that, it multiplies its actual influence far beyond its GDP or the size of its arsenal.
So it can mediate conflicts that other, more self-interested powers can't even touch.
Exactly. And the connection becomes crystal clear. The domestic moral and constitutional strength, the integrity of Pillars 1 and 2, that translates directly into credibility and influence on the world stage, that's Pillar 3.
It creates a unique form of soft power.
And resilience. Think about it. If Pakistan is known globally as a nation where contracts are honored, where the law is supreme, where corruption is aggressively prosecuted, and where all citizens are treated equally, it immediately gains this immense moral capital.
So when that nation speaks on behalf of global justice for oppressed populations somewhere else,
its voice carries a disproportionate weight because its hands are internally clean. It's leading by example, not by coercion. The domestic state of its moral and constitutional health becomes, in effect, its primary diplomatic tool.
we have to pivot now. We've laid out this incredible aspirational vision. But now we have to turn to the pragmatic and, frankly, painful diagnosis that the book presents.
This section offers a necessary moment of sober reflection. It acknowledges the massive gap between the blueprint and the reality with a kind of brutal clarity.
And the book refuses to accept easy excuses for why that vision remains unfulfilled. It tackles the painful question head-on, and it counters so many popular narratives that always look for, facile explanations elsewhere.
That's why the discussion of what it calls misattributed failures is so critical. The book just dismisses this fatalistic idea that Pakistan's current state was somehow inevitable.
It says what did not cause the failure.
Exactly. It wasn't a lack of resources. The country is fertile and geographically rich. It wasn't the people. They're resilient, innovative, industrious. It wasn't the geography. It holds an immensely strategic position at the nexus of major global regions.
And it wasn't the ideology. The constitutional mission itself was unifying and principle-based.
Right. So by eliminating all of those external or structural excuses, the responsibility falls squarely on internal choices.
That's the crucial pivot. The book then details the true causes of crisis, and it attributes them directly to deviations from that foundational blueprint we just discussed.
The first, and the book says the most critical failure, was the abandonment of constitutional discipline.
And that doesn't just mean ignoring the Constitution sometimes.
No, it means actively circumventing it, undermining its supremacy, treating it as this pliable document that's subject to the transient desires of the powerful, whether they be political, military, or institutional.
And that feeds directly into the second point, institutional decay, the failure of the structure itself.
The book meticulously traces how state bodies, the civil service, the police, the bureaucracy, they just stopped operating neutrally on merit. They became politicized.
Serving factional interests.
Yes. Replacing meritocracy with patronage and competence with compliance. And this decay is catastrophic because it destroys Pillar 2. If the very institutions that are meant to uphold the law are themselves compromised, the constitutional state is hollowed out from within.
The third cause, which is linked closely to the failure of Pillar 1, is moral compromise.
This is the systemic failure of ethics. It's when corruption becomes institutionalized, when integrity becomes optional, and when the public good is sacrificed routinely for private or factional gain.
When state funds are treated as personal wealth.
The moral contract between the state and the citizen is shattered, it's gone.
Fourth, the book points directly to leadership without accountability.
When leaders at any level are exempt from the very laws they're supposed to uphold, it sends a clear message to everyone else that power is a shield against justice.
Which is the exact opposite of a constitutional state. It fatally damages public trust.
And all of this leads to the fifth and final cause, the resulting erosion of national unity. When people see constitutional discipline abandoned, when they see institutions decaying, when they see leaders who are unaccountable, the inevitable result is deep, pervasive distrust in the state.
And fragmentation among the people.
Unity, which is achieved through trust and fair treatment, it's replaced by suspicion and zero-sum politics.
So if we synthesize this entire painful diagnosis, the central conclusion of the source is just. It's unavoidable.
It is. The book concludes, deviation from the Quaid's blueprint, not destiny, caused Pakistan's crises.
It places the responsibility squarely and undeniably on statecraft, on the internal choices made over decades.
The system was robustly designed, but the operators, they chose not to follow the manual, and that led to systemic, self-inflicted failures. Therefore, the solution must also be an internal act of restoration.
And given that the diagnosis pins the failure on statecraft, on operational choices, the book then transitions seamlessly into this comprehensive, unified roadmap for national revival.
And this isn't theoretical philosophy. This is a detailed, actionable plan for statecraft. It has to be treated as the nation's single, unified priority list.
This section is the core of the solution, isn't it? It outlines the restoration steps designed to systematically reverse the decay we just diagnosed.
It's the 9-point roadmap for achieving constitutional health and integrity.
Let's analyze each of these 9 points in detail. Let's start with the immediate structural necessity, point 1, restore constitutional supremacy. What practical measures does the book suggest this entails beyond just making speeches about the Constitution?
It requires a fundamental shift in behavior, not just rhetoric. Every single institution, legislative, executive, military, and judicial, must explicitly and demonstrably acknowledge the Constitution as the sole source of its authority.
And not just acknowledge it, but act on it.
Act on it. It must actively and publicly restrain itself from exceeding its prescribed powers. This means implementing immediate, non-negotiable legal and structural checks to ensure that any attempt to circumvent the law is immediately punishable, regardless of the office held by the violator.
Point 2, rebuild institutions on merit and neutrality. This directly targets that institutional decay failure.
And it's an existential issue for Pillar 2. This means rooting out patronage, corruption, and political appointments across the entire bureaucracy, including the key regulatory and law enforcement agencies. Meritocracy ensures competence. Neutrality ensures trust.
So a rebuilt institution has to act as a loyal servant of the law.
Not a loyal servant of the ruling faction. That's the critical difference.
Third, enforce accountability without exception. This is about non-selective justice. How does the book suggest we overcome what is a very entrenched culture of selective accountability?
The only way to overcome it is through consistent, visible, and fearless application of the law. Justice must apply equally to all levels of society and leadership, regardless of their political affiliation, their wealth, or their institutional seniority.
Because if accountability is selective, it's not justice.
It's just a political tool used by one faction against another. Non-selective accountability is the clearest, most profound signal that the constitutional state is back in business. It proves that constitutional power is truly supreme.
Okay, moving to the economy. Point 4 is achieve economic self-reliance. The book clearly links this to strategic autonomy. What kind of economic shifts does this blueprint champion to move away from that dependency model?
Economic self-reliance means structuring the national economy to minimize your reliance on external borrowing just for basic functions. It means maximizing indigenous productivity and ensuring that strategic national assets are controlled domestically.
So fostering local industry.
Fostering local industry, prioritizing value-added exports, and rigorously collecting domestic revenue. This autonomy is vital because true global leadership, Pillar 3, it cannot be achieved if your country is fiscally vulnerable to external pressures and blackmail.
Fifth, revolutionize education. And this can't just be about increasing literacy rates, can it? The book emphasizes a fundamental shift in the content and the purpose of schooling.
Exactly. Education has to be revolutionized to produce citizens and leaders who are not just technically proficient, which is, of course, important, but who are also imbued with the moral and constitutional literacy that a principled state requires.
So teaching critical thinking, the history of the constitutional struggle.
Yes. Instilling civic responsibility. Integrating ethical conduct into every level of schooling. This is how you rebuild the foundational moral society of Pillar 1. Education is the mechanism for rebuilding the national character.
Point 6 focuses on the future. Empower youth with discipline and leadership. And the emphasis here is on character development just as much as on opportunity.
Because empowerment without discipline is potentially chaotic. The Quaid's vision demanded a disciplined nation. So empowering youth means giving them opportunities, avenues for innovation, but it also means instilling the self-discipline, the respect for law, the work ethic, and the moral courage they'll need to be effective, responsible leaders.
You're training them to uphold the blueprint, not subvert it like past generations.
Precisely.
Seventh, heal internal divisions through justice. The book highlights that unity is a consequence of fair treatment, not just emotional slogans.
That is the core insight. You can't command unity, you have to earn it. If all regions, all provinces, all demographics feel that they are being treated fairly under the law and that their legitimate grievances can be addressed transparently and constitutionally, divisions naturally begin to heal.
So a lack of unity is just a political symptom of unequal justice.
And therefore, justice has to be the curative policy.
Eighth is to reclaim the national narrative. This focuses on having a unified story, a unified identity that's rooted in these foundational principles.
The national identity must be anchored in the Quaid's original intent, a commitment to constitutionalism, justice, and moral governance for all citizens, irrespective of their background. The narrative has to unify diverse populations under the banner of the supreme law, ensuring everyone sees themselves reflected in the mission of the state.
And finally, point 9, govern with transparency and law. This is the operational demand for clear, legal, and open governance that can rebuild public trust.
Transparency is the ultimate antidote to corruption and institutional decay. When governance operates in the light of day, every citizen becomes a potential watchdog, accountability is simplified, and citizens' trust can finally be restored and maintained.
This 9-point roadmap, it's the comprehensive synthesis required to bring Pakistan from crisis back to the path that Quaid intended.
The path of moral and global leadership.
This detailed restoration blueprint, it forces us to circle back to the central theme, but now with a completely new depth of understanding. If this 9-point plan were actually enacted, what would that restored state look like on the world stage?
We have to challenge the listener's typical definition of superpower here.
Absolutely.
This is the crucial reframing. The book intentionally distances the concept of power from those traditional models of empire and coercive force. The new definition is the key.
Oh, what is it?
A superpower is not one that dominates others, but one that influences the world through values, stability, and credibility.
That contrast is profound. Traditional power, it seeks compliance. It relies on military and economic muscle to force behavior.
But principled influence, which the book advocates, relies on magnetic attraction. The world seeks to emulate, to trust, and to partner with a nation because of its intrinsic integrity.
Dominating power is inherently unstable. It creates resentment and resistance, forcing you to perpetually spend on security and enforcement.
While influential power, built on the internal values and stability of pillars 1 and 2, creates alignment, partnership, and a kind of soft power that requires far less military projection. If Pakistan successfully implements this restoration blueprint, it becomes a model of success.
A stable, constitutional, moral democracy that is economically autonomous.
Exactly.
So what are the specific, practical, global roles the book outlines for this new kind of power? What would make a restored Pakistan indispensable on the global stage?
First, it can act as a bridge between civilizations. Leveraging its unique cultural and geographical position, a modern Islamic state committed to constitutional democracy, it becomes the natural, credible facilitator of dialogue between the West and the Muslim world.
Reducing global polarization.
Precisely. Second, it becomes a natural leader of Muslim world diplomacy. It could provide a stable, principled voice that can unite and advocate for the global Muslim community effectively, specifically because its internal house is in order.
Its foreign policy would be ethically grounded.
Third, because of its strategic geography, at the crossroads of Central Asia, the Middle East, South Asia, a self-reliant Pakistan would naturally become a hub of trade, energy, and ideas. A linchpin connecting these massive regions, maximizing prosperity instead of being a zone of conflict.
Fourth, by achieving this vision, it fulfills the promise of being a model constitutional democracy. It would prove that the vision for a Muslim-majority modern state based on supreme law can succeed.
which would offer profound inspiration for other nations struggling with similar challenges. And finally, it would function as a moral voice in global affairs, using its hard-earned credibility to champion international justice and human rights without being dismissed as hypocritical or self-serving.
The world, the book argues, does not need another empire built on domination.
And the ultimate conclusion of this segment, it summarizes the ambition perfectly. The world does not need another empire. It needs a principled Pakistan.
As we conclude this deep dive into the Quaid's full blueprint, the book wisely directs the conversation back to us, back to the listener. It frames the responsibility not just on abstract leaders or institutions, but on every citizen.
It makes the task of revival collective and immediate.
This is the ultimate lesson of sovereignty and self-reliance, isn't it? The source of national strength is always internal.
The book makes this crystal clear with this statement. The revival of Pakistan will not come from outside. It will come from within, through discipline, unity, law, and moral courage.
That just emphasizes that the power to change the trajectory is internal. It's not dependent on foreign aid or international intervention or geopolitical luck.
It's dependent on a collective commitment to the foundational values. And this demands effort from 5 specific groups, which are detailed in the final message.
Okay, who are they?
First, it demands effort from responsible citizens, individuals who uphold the law, pay their taxes honestly, respect public property, and exercise their rights responsibly. They have to understand that their individual discipline contributes to national discipline.
It requires honest leaders, those who prioritize the nation above self-interest, who exemplify the ethical standards of Miller 1, and who serve as stewards of the public trust, not plunderers of the national treasury.
It needs fearless institutions, state bodies that are committed to merit and neutrality, willing to enforce the law even against the powerful, reflecting the strength of Pillar 2. They have to be prepared to resist political pressure.
It demands an educated youth, the generation that has absorbed the values of discipline, constitutionalism, and moral responsibility, ready to execute the statecraft roadmap without repeating the errors of the past.
And fundamentally, it requires constitutional loyalty as the ultimate unifying principle. Regardless of political, ethnic, or regional differences, loyalty to the supreme law must be the common thread that holds the diverse society together.
If every group agrees on the rules of the game can be played fairly.
And unity becomes achievable.
The message is a reminder that the national aspiration, the concept of Pakistan Zindabad, it's not just an emotional slogan.
No, at its core, it is a constitutional mission. It's a mission to uphold the supreme law, the morality, and the discipline that define the state.
And the book delivers this final, unifying command, a summary of the entire blueprint and a direct call to action, which really encapsulates everything we've talked about today.
It does. Return to the Quaid, return to the Constitution, return to discipline and justice, and Pakistan will rise as a moral and global power.
The Quaid provides the vision, the Constitution provides the tools, and discipline and justice provide the fuel to achieve that status. This has been an incredibly rigorous and, I think, deep synthesis of foundational statecraft. If I had to pick one most surprising insight from this entire deep dive, for me, it would be the concept of moral authority being designated the first superpower. It just fundamentally forces you to rethink what true, enduring national strength actually is.
It's the lesson that integrity is a greater strategic asset than resources in the long run. Now, for you, the listener, a question. If we reflect on that 9-point roadmap for restoration, constitutional supremacy, institutional merit, non-selective accountability, economic self-reliance, which of those 9 points do you feel is the single most critical starting point for statecraft right now? Where must the first domino fall to initiate the complete revival?
That choice requires you to immediately apply the knowledge gained because it forces you to identify the deepest structural flaw that needs fixing before anything else can follow. And let's leave you with one final thought to mull over, building on the source material's emphasis on constitutional loyalty.
Go on.
If constitutional loyalty is truly the ultimate unifying factor, what single action immediately implementable by a citizen today, not a leader, not an institution, but a committed citizen, what single action best demonstrates that loyalty?
That thought encourages the practical realization that national revival begins with individual discipline and adherence to the supreme law.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the foundational blueprint for a moral and global Pakistan. We hope you carry forward this mission of constitutional clarity and moral leadership.
Until next time, stay well informed and committed to the pursuit of justice.